In 2014, I needed to travel from Europe back to Australia. I decided to take the Trans Mongolian Express with a friend. We joined a tour in St. Petersburg and arrived in Beijing a few weeks later. We weren't quite sure what we wanted to do on our first morning into St. Petersburg, so we just set off to walk into town. Our hotel was on the Nevsky Prospect, which is the main street, so orientation was no problem. We went into the church on spilled blood, which was built on the spot where Alexander II was assassinated. Every part of every surface is covered in the most beautiful mosaics with lots of gold and stunning colours. This has all been restored, which is curious given that the Soviet government banned religion for so long. I had to see the statue of the Bronze Horseman because it plays such an important part in the novel of the same name by Paulina Simons. The statue was erected by Catherine the Great in honour of one of her predecessors, Peter the Great. Afterwards we walked past a statue of another Tsar. This statue is one of the few in the world which depicts someone riding a horse and in which the statue is fixed to the base by only 2 points of contact, the 2 back hooves. The statue has to be very carefully balanced for this to work. My friends were very clever in that they booked and paid tickets for the Hermitage Museum online, so we didn't have to queue with 3,000 other people for the tickets. I can't say much about the Hermitage Museum. It's just overwhelming. The little cloakroom has space for 1,400 bags. The big cloakroom caters for 6,000 people's belongings. The staircase is to die for, and the minute one walks into the first room, one is already completely overwhelmed. We still hadn't joined our tour, so we set off to explore St. Petersburg some more by ourselves. We found a bridge with griffins and another bridge with horses being tamed. We wandered past and then dropped into a cafe called I'm Thankful for Today. We each ordered a coffee and drank it out of some lovely cups. We eventually ended up at Peter the Great's cabin. Peter had this log cabin built when he first decided to build a city at St. Petersburg. He lived in it for only one summer, but I imagine he had an absolute ball enjoying a much simpler life while he was there. Of course, Peter never had to do anything as tedious as housework either. He would have had numerous minions around to do all the boring stuff for him. I used to study anthropology, so I found the Cultural Museum in St. Petersburg quite interesting. I wandered around for ages taking photos of all the different ethnic costumes. These shoes look interesting. I wonder how long it would take to make some of those. Afterwards I went to a nearby art museum. I was interested in some pictures of St. George, who's normally shown fighting dragons. I couldn't help but feel sorry for St. George. It wasn't enough to be a dragon slayer. In the next painting he was depicted giving money to the poor, for which he was arrested, tried in front of the emperor, tortured in many innovative ways, and eventually beheaded. We joined our tour group and went to have tea with two local girls in their apartment. The two girls had cooked a multi-course meal, traditional Russian potato salad as an entree, mushroom soup made from dried mushrooms which had been gathered in the forest, blinis, which are small thin pancakes with red salmon caviar, dill and cream cheese, potatoes with chicken rissoles, and lastly a nameless pink dessert. All of this was accompanied by berry juice pressed from forest berries and copious shots of vodka. The girls took great care to teach us how to drink vodka properly: sniff, scull, and follow up quickly with a bite of onion. We boarded the train after midnight for our first Trans Mongolian sleeper experience. There were sheets for each bunk and the toilets weren't too gross. I was pleasantly surprised. Our train arrived in the early morning in Moscow and we spent the day sightseeing. Best of all was St. Sergius Monastery with its gleaming cupolas, smoky interiors and glorious paintings and mosaics. We had a few days to fill before the tour continued on, so we checked out the metro stations with their revolutionary art, the Red Square and the Kremlin. With all of this, I couldn't help feeling that Russia was a very serious place. Needing a bit of light relief from cathedrals, politics and the seriousness of Russian life, we decided to go to Tolstoys House in the suburbs. I was quite glad that Franwin didn't suggest a visit to the Dostoevsky place of interest. That would have completely finished me. Tolstoy's house is old, wooden, wonderfully furnished and decorated as if the old bloke was still living there with his family. His study, where he probably wrote War and Peace and Anna Karenina, was right at the back of the house, away from all the noise and kerfuffle of a whole tribe of children with nannies, servants, etc. There was an old bicycle which Tolstoy learnt to ride at the age of 67. There was a stuffed bear on the landing holding a card tray in its paws. Following on from the literary theme, Franwin and I used our by now formidable detective skills to get to Chekhov's house. She did 95% of the detective work and I really just tagged along, but I insist on getting full credit for my 5%. Without me, we would never have got there. The house is old, wooden, with small bedrooms and small beds for small people. The garden was lovely, a veggie patch and lots of overgrown shrubs and a pond. It would take an army of gardeners to keep it all organised. The kitchen was in a separate building with the servants' quarters. The servants were all taught to read. Chekhov was also a doctor for all the local peasants. He seems to have been quite a humanitarian and forward thinker for his time. We boarded our train after midnight again for the 4-day journey to Irkutsk. We stopped for a short time at Ekaterinburg, where the imperial family was murdered in 1917 as part of the revolution, but we didn't get to see any of this. The train was really hot and didn't have any air conditioning. If we opened a window to get some fresh air, the carriage conductress would come along and slam it shut again. We were really glad whenever we had a longer stop at a station, so we could get off, stretch our legs and breathe some cool, refreshing air. Every carriage had its own samovar, which gave us unlimited amounts of boiling water for soups or for tea or coffee. If we got fed up with hot drinks, we could always go to the dining car and enjoy a meal with the obligatory vodka. By the time we had spent 3 nights in the train with no showers, we were very happy to leave the train, just to get away from our own body odours.
You can do that too for us.
We arrived in Irkutsk in the evening and were transferred to Lake Baikal by bus. This is the deepest freshwater lake in the world and it's huge. In winter the ice is so thick that people drive 4-wheel drives on it, not just for fun but as a viable transport option. We walked along the waterfront and gazed in astonishment at this hotel which is masquerading as a wedding cake. But we were saddened by this little bear cub. This is where he should be, roaming around in the forest with his mother, learning all the things that bears need to know to survive in their world. Siberia is full of forests. It was to be expected that the buildings are mainly made of wood, but I was suitably impressed with the many artistic variations on the one theme.